Hey guys, I'm Connor from Kamerastore.com and we're back with another how-to video. This time we're discussing the Yashica FX-3. This is a Contax Yashica mount SLR released in 1979. And it's a really great little camera, especially for beginners. It's mechanical, so no batteries needed. Fully manual exposure only, so you'll either know how to expose or you'll be forced to learn how to expose. But yeah, in this video we will go over all the buttons, all the switches and dials, and some basics on how to use the camera. Let's start with some history. The Yashica FX-3 was released in 1979, and it was part of this collaboration between Yashica and Carl Zeiss, or Contax. They produced a joint lens mount, and then each made cameras and lenses for it. So that's actually one of the big advantages of this FX-3, is that it can use some of these really great Carl Zeiss lenses, like this 50mm f1.4. These are some of the most highly regarded, excellent performing lenses on the market, and you can get them on this relatively small, relatively cheap body. Another one of the big advantages of the Yashica FX-3 is, as I said, it's mechanical, so there's no battery required to fire the shutter. The battery only powers the light meter, so just a little bit easier and sometimes a little bit more reliable as well. Before we go over the different buttons and dials, let's get the camera set up. So there's two things we're going to want to do: install a lens and install the battery. We'll start with the battery, so we're going to want to turn the camera upside down like this. Grab a coin. Any thin coin will work. It'll go in this slot right here. Twist that lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. And it should come out pretty quickly. There we go. So there's our little battery compartment. And the camera takes two LR44 batteries. They're these small button batteries. They're pretty common. You can normally find them in hardware stores or camera stores. And you just want to, let me put the camera down for a second. And there is a tiny diagram, you can see it there, that shows you what direction to put the battery. Basically, you want to put the positive side. You can see the little plus. You want to put that facing up. Two of them like that. So it should just look like this. Then that goes back in the camera. Twist it a little bit. And there you go. The battery is now installed on our Yashica FX-3. So the next thing we'll want to do is learn how to install or uninstall a lens. So we're going to want to turn the camera right here. And there's a small black button here. You hold that down. The lens will rotate towards you like that and pop right off. So now the lens is unattached, as you can see. To reattach it, you're going to want to take this red dot on the lens and line it up with this red dot here on the body. Goes in, and then you just twist it there. And when the lens is attached, this little diagram should always line up with the Yashica logo. So that's how you know that your lens is properly attached to your Yashica FX-3. And with that, we're pretty much ready to shoot. So let's go ahead and take the camera. On the bottom here, we'll look at the top plate and go from left to right and just explain what everything is. So starting here, we have our rewind knob. This is how we'll rewind the film when we're done, and also how we'll open the back. You can see it sprung open there. A little bit further in, we have our hot shoe. So this is where you'd attach a flash. The Yashica FX-3 only has one flash contact point, so it works in manual flash mode only. So you'll have to do some manual calculations yourself and know a little bit about the flash before you are able to use it properly. A little bit further here, we have our shutter speed dial. So this gives us our range of shutter speeds from 1/1000th all the way out to 1 full second. So this determines how long the shutter is held open. So it's literally just an amount of time. So 1 second is 1 second. And then 1/1000th is a much smaller percentage of a second. So that's a lot less light that is hitting the film. Different shutter speeds affect your photography in a number of different ways. Faster shutter speeds are going to be good at capturing motion, whereas slower shutter speeds, like I said, let more light in. So in dark situations, you may need to use them. For handheld photography, I wouldn't recommend anything below 1/60th. So basically 30, 15, 8. Anything below that, I would use a tripod. So for handheld photography, 125 and above are great. You may notice here in the shutter speed dial, there's a little ISO window. It says ASA, but ISO and ASA are the same thing. So that corresponds to the speed or sensitivity of your film. So you want to basically set that to whatever your film is. So we have a test roll here. It's ISO 100, just some code of color here. So I would set that to 100, and you can see it is actually already at 100. But if I had, for example, 400 speed film, you lift this ring. You can see it lift a bit. You lift that ring, and then you turn it. And the shutter speed should stay the same, but the ISO updates in that little window. So just make that match your film, and then you should be good for exposure. A little further here, we have our shutter button. So that's what you press to fire the shutter once it's been wound. And then related to that is our film advance lever. So you pull that, and it snaps back. If it doesn't snap back, or it doesn't let you pull it, something might be wrong with the camera. It does have a little bit of a sort of dead zone here, and yeah. This is actually, I believe, a power switch for the camera as well, so you can turn it off by pushing it in like that. Just above that is our frame counter. So as I pull the film advance lever, you can see that number count up. And that'll keep going until you're done with the roll. On a roll of 26 or 34, which are the most common. You can actually get a few extra frames, so this will go up to, I believe, 40. And you can easily get, 37, 38 frames on a roll of 36, if you're careful with your loading. So that just about covers the top plate of the Yashica FX-3. We'll very quickly cover the back of the camera as well, because there's actually some important features here. We have the viewfinder, where you put your eye when you want to see what you're going to take a picture of. This is where your focus aid and your light meter are. We'll go over what it looks like inside of here later. Just this is where it is. A little bit to the right, we have our light meter button. So the FX3 takes a kind of interesting approach to the light meter, in that you have to hold this down for the light meter to be active. That's good for preserving battery, but it means you have to remember to do it, otherwise your light meter won't activate. It's not that hard to remember, and it's actually in a really nice spot that when you're holding the camera, it's right under where your thumb is. So pretty nice there. Yeah, we'll get into how the light meter works and what it looks like a little bit later. Next up, we have the bottom of the camera. And we looked at this before, but let's just go over. There's not much here. We have the battery compartment. Like I showed before, this unscrews and you put the batteries in. Next to that is our tripod socket. It's a standard 1/4 inch tripod socket, so that lets you attach it to a tripod, a monopod, or some other accessories as well. Yeah, pretty standard stuff. And over here, we have our rewind button. So when you're done with the roll, you'll press this button in, and that will release some tension inside of the body here and allow you to rewind the film. So as you wind the film, it's going to move from this side of the camera over to this side, and then when you rewind, it goes this way. So you need to press that button in order to do that. And that basically covers the bottom of the camera. Like I said, not much going on here. Now let's talk a bit about the lenses for the Yashica FX-3. As I said before, the Yashica FX-3 can use basically any Contax Yashica mount lens. That includes Yashica lenses, that includes these Carl Zeiss ones. It also includes a bunch of third-party ones. This was a pretty common mount, so there will be lenses from Vivitar, from Tamron, from Sigma, from a bunch of different companies. I'll take the lens off and basically give you a little look at the back of the lens. If your lens mount looks just like this, then it should work on the camera. I'll put the lens back on, line up that red dot with the red dot, and now we can talk about the features of the lens. So starting from the body and working our way out, we have our aperture ring here. This correlates to an opening inside the lens that gets wider or more narrow depending on your setting. So these larger numbers are more narrow settings, and these smaller numbers are wider settings. These wider settings let in more light, but have the consequence of a more shallow depth of field. So if you've ever seen a portrait with a very sharp subject but a blurry background, that was achieved with a small number like this, whereas a landscape photo or something where everything is in focus would be achieved with an aperture like this. And you'll need to change this in order to get proper exposure depending on how bright your situation is. A little bit further in, we have our focus ring and depth of field scale. These work together to basically tell us what distance our subject should be. This main white line in the center tells us the precise focus, so right now it's set to 10 feet and 3 meters. And you can use that to sort of get a vague estimate of how far away your subject should be if you're not looking through the viewfinder. There's also this depth of field scale, so this connects the focus with the aperture. So I'll go ahead and I'll set the aperture to 16. And then we can use these widest markers that have 16s next to them to tell us a range of things that will be in focus. So right now I put 10 meters at the right 16 and 1.5 is here. So anything between 1.5 meters and 10 meters will be in focus if I use f16 with this 50mm lens. So this is different depending on what lens you have attached. But yeah, a quick way to get a range of focus if you're doing, for example, street photography. One final thing to cover is the self-timer, and that's here on the front of the camera. So you would just pull it this way, and then when you fire the shutter, it will count down and slowly creep back towards its original position. I'm not going to do it because it's loud. But yeah, you pull that, and when, like I said, when you fire the shutter, it counts down, and that's great for self-portraiture, for doing group shots, and for other creative purposes where you don't necessarily need to be behind the camera taking the picture yourself. Now that we've covered pretty much all of the buttons, features, and dials on the Yashica FX-3, let's go over some basic operation, where we'll go over how to load and unload film, as well as look through the viewfinder and talk about how the light meter works and how the focusing works. So let's get started with loading film. So we're going to want to take the camera, flip it upside down like this, and then take the rewind knob that we saw before. You can flip out this little lever thing here, pull it up, it'll stop, and you want to pull it just a little bit further, and the back will pop. It's spring loaded, so it should pop pretty decently. Then we can see the inside of the camera here. One of the coolest things, at the time at least, for the Yashica FX-3 was its use of a vertical metal shutter. A lot of cheaper cameras used horizontal cloth shutters that just maybe weren't as reliable over a long time, but the Yashica used the vertical metal shutter, which are pretty much ubiquitous these days. So, pretty cool. Now that we have the back open, we can load our film. So, I have that test roll I showed earlier. We'll just pop it in here. And at this point, we can push this back in and it should hold the film in place. It won't come out unless I really pull it. You're going to want to take the film, pull it across, and you can see these two spools here. This one, when I advance the film, you can see which way they rotate. This one rotates this way, this one rotates that way. So it pulls the film in between them, basically. So what you want to do is pull the film across, and then slot it into one of these slots. There we go. And you'll know you did it correctly if you can see the back side of the film here, and it is attached to the little teeth on this sprocket. And now normally you'd close the back, but I'll show you what happens if you wind it just a few more times, and you can see the film pulling across there. And yeah, it's not particularly tight right now, but it's held tight by this thing on the back. So now we close the back. And you can see this moving. That's because it's attached to the roll. That's often a good way to tell if you have film loaded or not, if you forget, is if this is moving. So I've wound the film a little bit more so that the frame counter is at 1 or a little bit past 1 actually now. So now I'm ready to shoot, and I can trust that there are no light leaks on my film. I'll shoot through the roll. I'll just take a few shots so we can rewind it. And there we go. Now we're at 10, or around 10. So we can rewind the film, and hypothetically you'd be totally done with the roll. So you can basically just shoot until the camera prevents you from shooting anymore. It'll get really difficult to pull this. You won't be able to just do this. See, actually, it's done now. I have a short roll, so. To rewind the film, we flip it upside down, like I said earlier. We have this button. We press that down. I'm going to hold it. You shouldn't have to, but it's an old camera, so you might have to. then we take the rewind knob again and we rotate it along with this arrow. You can see the arrow there. We rotate it like this, and it should feel pretty easy to do, but once you reach the end of the roll, it should make a noise, and I'm waiting for it to happen. It'll make a noise as if it's sort of coming detached, because it is. It's coming detached from here. And it'll become much easier to turn as well. And there's the noise. I don't know if you heard that, but there was a noise. And normally you would keep rewinding so that the roll goes all the way back inside. But I want to reuse the test roll, so I won't do that. But yeah, once you've fully rewound the film inside the canister, you're ready to bring it to your lab for processing, or do it yourself if you want to. And you can close the back up, and you're all set. There you go, you've shot, fully wound, rewound, and your first roll is ready to develop. Congratulations. Now let's talk about what's inside the viewfinder and what you'll see as you're taking pictures with the Yashica FX-3. So now we're looking inside the viewfinder of the Yashica FX-3. There's basically only two things I want to cover here. That's the focus aid in the middle and the light meter, which you actually can't see right now. So we'll start with the focus aid. The Yashica FX-3 has a split prism surrounded by micro prisms. So there's a circle right in the middle with a line through it. That line's actually diagonal on the Yashica FX-3. Normally it's horizontal. So it's the personal preference if you like that more or not. A lot of people do. I find it quite usable. But yeah, so basically that works by, as I turn the focus ring here, you can see the top and the bottom moving left and right. And when the top and the bottom are lined up, like they are basically now, then your subject is in focus. And that basically works anywhere. So if you have one of these, focus on something up close and then point the camera at something far away, and you'll be able to see the difference. So you do have to refocus every time if your subject is at a different distance. Surrounding that split prism is what we call microprisms. That's a little bit harder to see in this view, at least. It's pretty clear when you have the camera up to your eye, but it sort of looks like a texture, if that makes sense. Like it's a little bit sort of sharp when the subject is not in focus, and then when the subject is in focus, it looks pretty normal. So you can use that as a sort of a supplement to your split prism. And with both of them together, you should be able to, with practice of course, get pretty good at focusing and be able to focus on things at almost any distance pretty quickly. So yeah, and once you've learned that, you should be able to focus with most 35mm SLRs as well. So give that a go and take some practice and be patient with yourself, because you'll probably make some mistakes with the focus in the beginning. I definitely did. Next we have our light meter, and like I said, this is activated by pressing that button on the back of the camera, and you can actually see the LEDs pop on when I do that. The FX3 has a pretty simple LED system that tells you if you're overexposed, underexposed, or properly exposed. So right now, when I press the button, it's a red minus, and that means underexposed. So if I go ahead and I rotate our shutter speed ring, and there you go, now it's a green circle, and that means properly exposed. So right now I would have to use 1/8 of a second with my given aperture, which is 11. One unfortunate thing about the FX3 is that you can't see either the shutter speed or the aperture that you have selected, so you do have to take your eye away from the finder for that. And if I keep rotating, it becomes a red plus, and that means that you're overexposed. So the picture will be a little bit too bright. So yeah, just through a combination of shutter speed and aperture, you should be able to get proper exposure in pretty much any situation, as long as you have the right film and the right lens. And that just about covers everything that we have inside of the viewfinder of the Yashica FX-3. So I'll just quickly go over a few things that you should be aware of when buying a Yashica FX-3. The first thing is going to be the most obvious to you, and it's this leatherette here. This FX3 has had the leatherette replaced. Most of them will have a smooth black leatherette that's probably peeling quite a bit. or it's even peeled off completely and it's sort of a fuzzy camera, or it's just plain plastic or metal. It's not so hard to buy a replacement leather, and it's not so hard to replace the leather yourself, so don't let that dissuade you from buying the camera. Yeah, it's just an unfortunate choice that Yashica made at the time of this camera's production. Just cosmetic, not a big deal. The second thing to be aware of is with the mirror, actually. I'll take the lens off. Sometimes the glue on these mirrors, you can see the mirror actually moves a little bit when I press it. Sometimes the glue on these mirrors does not hold up so well over time, and the mirror sinks a little bit too low, and that can cause it to hit the back of the lens when you fire the shutter. Because if I fire the shutter, you see the mirror jumps up. So you don't want to hit the back of the lens with that. So just be aware of it. If the view through the viewfinder starts looking a bit strange, it might be because the mirror has moved out of place like that. Just something to be aware of. Yeah. The third thing is our light seals. So the Yashica FX-3 requires light seals, and it's this tiny bit of foam that you see sort of around the edges. And these all have really nice fresh ones because they came from our store. Light seals are something that needs to be replaced. Most of these cameras now are, if they came out in 1979, they're 40, 50 years old. So the foam that they used originally is not going to be good anymore. It does need to be replaced. We sell the foam on our site, so if you feel handy and want to replace it yourself, that's totally possible. Otherwise, you can just buy one from us and it'll have the seals already done, which saves you some time and some peace of mind because we do a good job with it. But otherwise, the Yashica FX-3 is a pretty reliable camera, a pretty great option for photographers who are familiar with manual photography because, like I said, there's no automatic modes. A small, reliable mechanical camera with great lenses like these Carl Zeiss ones, what's not to like? So, yeah, if you find yourself in possession of an FX-3, congratulations. You have a great camera, and I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I've been Connor from Kamerastore.com. Let us know down below what cameras you'd like us to cover next. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.